Okay. All right. Says we're live. Okay.
Right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Rapid Results with Andrew Weiss. We are doing a new platform today, Ecamm. So shout out to Ecamm for letting us do this wonderful interview. And we have an amazing guest today, Marc Mawhinney. And in case you don't know who this Canadian Marc guy is, he is a lifelong entrepreneur who has been helping coaches get more clients without paid ads since 2014. He's the host of the Natural Born Coaches podcast, which has almost 900 episodes released, and the Tarzan of the Coaching Jungle Facebook group, which has 26,000 coaches in that community. He's been a speaker at events like Social Media Marketing World, frequently making media appearances, and has contributed for Entrepreneur.com. You can learn more about him at naturalborncoaches.com. Marc, welcome to the show. Tell us, what's the biggest and best business deal you are most proud of?
Overall, generally, I'm proud of this business. As you mentioned, I started in 2014, my coaching business, and that was coming off a business closure. I say a bad business closure. There's never a good business closure in real estate, a few years before that. So I am proud of getting this up and running on a shoestring budget back then. If I'm looking more for a specific one, just for recent, I launched something called the Coaching Jungle VIP for my community, which we'll probably touch on with community monetization a few months ago at the beginning of the summer, and it's taken off like wildfire. And that's something that was just a full disclosure. He'll be mad if I don't mention it. It was just an offhand comment from my twin brother Matt. Said, "Hey, you should do this package that allow people to promote on the Coaching Jungle wall and do some other stuff." And then I took the ball and ran with it. So he never lets me forget it that, hey, technically it was his idea. But yeah, that I'm proud that it's grown as quickly as it has the last few months with great people too.
Well, and this idea has generated six figures just on its own, right?
Well, I have a joint venture program. So there's two things, I guess you could say. I have a JV program that I've been doing a certain way for the last 5-6 years, and that generates low six figures a year for my business. The Coaching Jungle VIP is we've got 80 some people in there, $100 a month, so that's close to a $10,000 a month monthly recurring with that one. But that's part of my partnerships, the VIP. But overall, that it's everything all in for JVs and the VIP would be six figures.
Awesome. I love it. So tell us, you probably didn't know how to do all this coming out of the womb. So how did you get the mindset to go after building these multi six figure businesses in the first place?
Well, yeah, I don't want to give my whole life story. I was 4 years old. I tripped on the way to kindergarten and scuffed my knee, and that taught me perseverance. Now, I would say a big moment in my life was in high school. I'm a big reader. I've always been, and I loved reading even back in junior high and high school. But it was usually political books. It would be sports stuff like that. And I was in high school going through the local bookstore when people actually went to the bookstore and not Amazon. And I noticed Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, which has been such a huge book. I'm sure it's been mentioned on your show many, many times. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I picked up that little book and just absolutely fell in love with it. So when I went to university, that was still in the back of my mind. And I read it, every year I would reread it. And I thought, I'd really like to get into business, become an entrepreneur. And that's what got me into real estate. I got my license just before I graduated. Got my graduation ceremony. My mom was quite upset because I grabbed, my hardware and then I left to go show a house. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, money talks, got to get going. So I was in real estate for 10 years. And then, as mentioned, that led eventually into coaching. And I would say that book and other, things I've learned with, that's a great thing with coaches, entrepreneurs. We're addicted to personal development and have learned a lot. And that was a really big moment to get me up and running.
And then what about your first sale as a coach? From real estate agent to a coach. I mean, that's an intimidating transition, like being able to sell tangible houses versus being able to sell coaching. Like, how was that like getting your first coaching sale per se?
You know what's funny? You wouldn't think they would be a lot of correlation between the two, but there actually is. Like in a
Really?
weird way, like you said, it's showing houses. You've got a bricks and mortar, something you can touch versus coaching. But where I credit real estate is it got me into the habit of being disciplined. I got my start and got rolling so quickly with real estate because I was really good with prospecting calls back when phones were, people talked on phones. They didn't just use them for apps. So I would do a certain number of cold calls every single day to expired listings usually. And then I worked 24/7, being at the time I was 21 when I got started through there. So you got all this energy, no kids, anything like that. You just work, work, work. But real estate instilled a lot of really good habits that I've carried over into coaching because, I've done things like you mentioned, the podcast, almost 900 episodes, daily emails to my list. I'm up over 3,000 straight days and stuff. So I credit real estate for that. So I don't want to say that it was easy getting started with coaching, but I did have an advantage because I'd spent so many years building up that real estate business, and that definitely helped the transition. Now, if I'd been 21, started coaching instead of real estate, then that would be a little different. The main difference there was real estate was very much, because I was selling in the early 2000s. I started in 2000. Real estate was very much old school, like postcards, radio ads, like I mentioned, prospecting calls, and of course, online coaching businesses, social media, email marketing, and so on. So there was a learning curve there for sure, but I had a lot of the foundational pieces in place, which helped.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious too, like, how did you know what to charge for your first coaching sale? Like I remember when I was doing my coaching journey and I charged $1,000 for my first coaching client. I'm like, oh my gosh, who would ever say yes to paying me $1,000? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, that's a challenge with coaching because it's a wild west. It's not like my brother, who I mentioned, he edits podcasts. There's a very, I won't say narrow range, or there are expensive editors and so on. But for the most part, if you're doing a service like editing podcasts or editing videos or, or if you're selling a car, for example, okay, what's the make, model, the approximate condition, then you check the blue book and you know roughly what it is. Coaching, you have people who are charging nothing in some cases, which I hope people don't do. I'm not a fan of free coaching. You have people charging $25-$50 a session. Then you got Tony Robbins, multiple six figures to work with him. Steve Hardison, who's a great coach, he charges well over six figures as well, and everywhere in between. So for me, I can't say it was terribly scientific. I threw it out there. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I said I'm going to charge for one-on-one coaching $500 a month. And it was month to month. It wasn't like a package of like 6 months or whatever. And I realized really quickly that wasn't the best move with it. And not to knock the early clients, but when I say quality of client, I just mean that the clients I have now generally need less hand holding and things where they're paying more. And you've heard this, I'm sure, before. And I had a client back in the day, I call him my What About Bob client, which probably before your time, the old movie with Bill Murray, Richard Dreyfuss. People can check it out. Basically, Bill Murray was a real pain in the butt client for the therapist or whatever, the psychiatrist. Richard Dreyfuss was calling him, and if he, 100 times a day, if he didn't answer right away, and then he ended up going to where Richard Dreyfuss had his family on a vacation at this lakeside town to like basically go find him. So I had a client that was a little bit like that. If I didn't answer a message within 10 minutes, it was just a bunch of other messages. And I was like, I'm not feeling this or whatever. So the price jumped up, and I have to credit Michael Port, who wrote the book, Book Yourself Solid. He has a principle in there called the red velvet rope theory. And the red velvet rope theory basically means if you're not just a coach, any entrepreneur, service provider, you treat your business like the hot new club or restaurant in town. You couldn't just stroll in and anyone, Tom, Dick, or Harry, get a table there, right? Like you got to book in advance, and there's a process there. The red velvet rope, you got the 6'5", 300 and some pound bouncer with the clipboard, is Andrew's name on it. If not, you're not getting in there. And I really credit that book because it flipped it. So many coaches are in that energy of they're the ones like needing the business, right? There's a bit of desperation or whatever. And I think that the market can pick up on that. So I went through red velvet rope strategy, changed my pricing, changed my criteria, who I would work with. And here we are today.
Oh, that is so awesome. And if you don't mind sharing, so what is your current red velvet rope process then? Like, do people have to
Yeah.
apply to a wait list, wait 2 weeks? Do they have to talk to a tough guy to see if they're even cool enough to talk to Marc? Like, what does that process look
Yeah,
like for you?
they have to send a blood sample.
Yeah,
They've
yeah,
got a
yeah.
DNA process. There's a 100-page questionnaire. No,
Oh, okay.
so the criteria I have are certain things. Like one of them, they have to be coachable, which sounds funny, but not everyone is coachable, right?
Hmm.
They have to be motivated, an action taker. So if somebody, this used to happen in the past, if someone was only 50% motivated, I would take the opinion, okay, well, I'll put 150% in and I'll drag them across the finish line, which isn't good for them or for me. So they have to be motivated. They have to have big goals, want to make a big impact. So not to knock someone, I work with coaches solely. And if this has happened where I've had coaches reach out to me and they're like, yeah, like I'm retired. I don't want to be working 100 hours a week. If I can, put an extra $1,000 in my pocket every month, I'm happy with that. And I'm not trying to judge because someone's goals are, that's their choice and that it's a free country. But that doesn't really excite me. Like I want people who are now on the flip side of it. Sometimes people think that they have to have the standard answer. I want to impact 1 billion people in the world, and I want to make $30 million a year, and I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm not saying you have to be like that, but a little more than extra pocket change is good.
Yeah.
They have to pay me, I guess, on time, and what I'm worth is important as well. So just sticking to those, that's nothing too crazy. I think that's pretty reasonable. But most coaches don't have those guardrails or that red velvet rope, and then that's why they get frustrated. So knock on wood, I haven't had many problem clients over the last 10 years just because I do stick to it. And if I'm ever feeling like, oh, my spidey senses are tingling here, I don't know if I want to work with them, I'll just say, hey, I don't think this is a best fit or I'm the guy for you. Good luck.
And what's like one of your favorite stories of taking a client from zero to hero after working with you?
Well, again, I would like to say I've worked with someone I've taken to a billion, that's impacted a billion lives.
Yeah.
A story that I always really enjoy because I think it's relatable for people is, well, I'll step back a little bit. There's a sense in the online space that people think if you're becoming a coach or an entrepreneur that you have to quit your day job. You have to say, burn the ships, right? Like the old saying, and just roll the dice and just go all in. And I get what they're saying, but that's could be a very stressful thing for them. If you've got bills coming in, you don't have any income, you're going to be tempted to take on any one as a client. So one of my clients, I was really happy with this one, is that she was working 9 to 5, office job, wanted to become a coach. And we talked about some of these things. And she's like, I feel like I have to be coaching, full time to really make a go of it. I'm like, don't do that. I said, you can just be
Yeah.
smart with your time, work evenings, some stuff on the weekends, but don't quit your job. And she ended up transitioning out of her job within 6 months. She was full-time coach. So now the online space is so messed up that the gurus would be like, you'd feel like, oh my God, 6 months. Like that's so long. That's too long. Because all the gurus are like, you're gonna make $1 million in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
working 5 minutes a day from your hot tub. I
Yeah.
think in the real world, 6 months to go from your office job to a coaching business that you love and you're supporting yourself, that's pretty darn good. So that story comes to mind, and that's a favorite one.
Wow, I love that. And I guess I'm also still surprised. I feel like your velvet rope isn't as intense or crazy as I would expect it to be after you worked with all these coaches over all these years. Like, I'm curious why you don't say, oh, you have to make minimum 6 figures a year and you don't have to do this trial before you work with you. Like, tell me about how you come up with your velvet rope process.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say there's no boundary. For example, I'll get sometimes someone coming onto my calendar, they'll book something in and I don't know them and they don't fill out the questions there for the reason for the call and things like that. And I'll shoot an email back like, hey, I just want to get a better sense. You didn't fill that out. What are you looking for out of this call? And if they're not, willing to fill that out or whatever, I'm probably not going to take the call. I had a guy years ago reached out. We had a mutual friend who's great. And he said, he's from Australia. And he's like, hi, Mark. And she is as well. Hi, Mark. I got your name from so-and-so. I'm looking to get started as a coach or whatever. I was on your calendar and the times don't work for me. You're going to have to book in my calendar. Because, of course, me being in Canada, him in Australia, I think it's about a 13-hour difference where we were at. And I pushed back, said, hey, I don't mind working around it sometimes where I'll go a few, like into the evening or
Yeah.
whatever, but I'm like, I'm not going to be going on at 3 a.m. I probably wouldn't be at my top game at that
Yeah.
time. And I just said, "Hey, look, this is my calendar." And there was something in there that just rubbed me the wrong way, because he had said something to the effect of like, this call, like, try, it's worth it, and kind of a "don't you know who I am" type mentality. And anyone who says "don't you know who I am," it's like, no, that's not going to work. So I just say, "Hey, look, this isn't going to be a good fit," and I didn't even take the call. So that's a really important thing for coaches, entrepreneurs to keep in mind, is it's your business, and you're not obligated to jump onto calls with strangers just because you're in business, with it. And I think that's very powerful, very freeing. I'm not like some people. I know one person that sells a recurring, like, membership type offer. If somebody leaves his offer, he blacklists them in a shopping cart online. You can't come back, and he's very clear about it, and he's very upfront. It works for him. That's not really my style, because sometimes people change. So if someone's in one of my subscription offers and they want to take a break for a few months and come back, I'm not gonna be like, no, you're not allowed back. Get the hell out. It's like, no, okay.
Interesting. Blacklist people if they, very interesting.
It probably works for him. Like, it helps reduce churn. I get it. It's just, it fits his style. I'm just not. That's not my style.
And I'm curious too. I mean, you run one of the largest coaching Facebook groups in the world, and I'm sure that's very exciting. And it's interesting, like having people come up to you and be like, "Oh, don't you know who I am?" I'm curious. Has there ever been any moments where you've been surprised, like, "Oh my gosh, this person who I look up to, who inspires me, who knows who I am now"? It's such a good feeling. Like, did you have any moments like that as you're growing your brand, growing your business?
Um, it's cool. And that's why I love podcasting. You probably find with your show too. There's people who I wouldn't have connected with otherwise if I didn't have the show. Well, a cool thing from this week I'll mention, just because it was a couple days ago. I was interviewed by Rich Sheffrin on his show Steal Our Winners.
Hmm.
Anyone does know Rich he's responsible for, I don't know how many billions of dollars online. Like, he was kind of created the lead magnet, the automated webinar. He was the one getting that out there. Did a lot of work with Agora publishing and everything. And
Wow.
anyways, I was on his show, and which I thought was really cool to get that invite with it. Steve Chandler, the Prosperous Coach, and Rich Liffin have been on the show, and which is cool. Just today, I got word that I don't know if anyone would know. Are you a Yankees fan? You're in New York, so
A little bit. I know a few players.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Nice interview. I'll see you later. No,
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
Yankees guy, but I'm a Blue Jays fan. I grew up a Blue Jays fan, and
Of course.
the
Yeah.
Yankees are the evil empire. I root
Of
against them, but it's
course.
all in good
Yankees,
fun.
Cowboys, the Lakers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. The
Yeah.
successful ones everyone goes after. But
Yeah.
yeah, I got word today that Todd Stottlemyre, who's a pitcher for the Blue Jays
Oh.
with their 92 and 93 World Series teams, I saw him as a 15-year-old when I went to watch the Jays against the Rangers in 93. He was pitching for the Jays. Anyways, he's coming on my show, which I thought is really cool, because it's like I was a kid with the baseball cards and, pretended to be a Blue Jay and playing catch and baseball 24/7, sleeping with my glove, next to me
Wow.
all the
Dedicated.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And well, actually, his family, I think his father was a pitching coach for the Yankees. First base coach was Mel Stottlemyre, I think. But anyways, yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool, and that's why I encourage people to start a podcast, because you're going to meet people you would have like I've met Mark Randolph, who was a co-founder of Netflix, was on
Oh
my
wow.
show.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
he was
Nice.
telling me, yeah, he was telling me the actual story where he and his partner went to the boardroom in Dallas to meet with Blockbuster when Netflix was a small fish and Blockbuster was rolling, and they were exploring getting acquired. And they threw out an offer when Blockbuster said, "How much do you want?" It was like 50 million or something. They got laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
Now we know that things have changed a little bit. So yeah, some cool guests.
Well, it's funny, like especially like with the Yahoo story too, and like Yahoo, they asked like Google, like, "Oh, we'll buy you out for 1 billion," and Yahoo's like, "You're not worth that much." Yeah, right. And then I think Google ended up buying Yahoo or something like that. But No, I do agree that, yeah, for those listening, like starting a podcast has definitely been an amazing journey and highly recommend because, yeah, it's a great way to connect with people you wouldn't otherwise connect with and have conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have, kind of thing. So I'm definitely a big fan of it too. One of my cool guests so far, I guess, celebrity, is Bob Berg, who wrote The Go Giver.
Yeah.
And so he's an awesome guy. He's always looking for guests shows to be on too. But yeah, so with my next question though, I'm curious. We'll ask a couple of questions around this topic. What do most people get wrong when it comes to attracting and helping new clients?
So I find a lot of newer coaches, as they're getting into it, expect that they're going to be coaching 80% of the time, and then the other 20% will be a little bit of marketing and taking care of some back end bookkeeping or whatever. And as you know, it's flipped. If you know, it's probably 80-90% of your time finding the clients, and then you're lucky to be spending 10% actually coaching them or whatever. And I try to tell people that early on, new coaches. And I always say I'm an optimist, but I'm a realistic optimist. So I don't want to feed them a line, oh, this is easy, slap up a website. You'll have people rushing to work with you, because it's not like that. And I think if, as you enter online business, if you have that in the back of your mind, not in a negative, pessimistic, oh my God, I'm going to fail, but just telling yourself, hey, it's not going to be all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows here. It's going to take some work, and there's going to be some peaks and valleys. That helps prepare you for when you hit those inevitable, curveballs coming out of left field there. So that would be a big one.
No, I love that. Yeah, it kind of reminds me too. Like people think, I think a good analogy is like in sports, like, oh, I want to be a world famous NBA player, and I just want to be able to show up to each game and play basketball. But you also have to put in the hours of practice, of diet, of watching film, of watching tape, and be able to do that. And that's a really good point of like, if you really want to be a coach, like be ready to put in the other 80-90% of time that people don't see so that you can even coach in the first place. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's like Larry Bird, I think it was, said that's what motivated him, was the thought of, if he wasn't practicing, shooting, dribbling, everything else, if there's some kid somewhere in America that's practicing, and he's going to be, coming up through the NBA and stuff. And you hear that with tennis players hitting the ball against the side of the building, 24/7 and so on. So you have to be willing to do the it's not always the most fun work, sitting down to do that, but consistency is an underrated superpower. People have asked me what's the one trait that I would attribute to my success, and I think consistency is a big one that pops up there. Is that when I start doing something, I commit to doing it. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't change course. I've done some things before. I had a solo podcast running alongside natural born coaches, and a lot of work. I did it for a year, 52 episodes. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to fold solo episodes into the main show. I'm not going to run a separate one. I did an Alexa flash briefing for a year, 365 of these, little 1 minute flash briefings. Like, no, it's not going to be for me. But I don't start something and then 2 weeks, if I don't get a client or the results I want, say, oh, I'm dumb, I'm going to move on to a bright, shiny object. So consistency is very important. Put the horse blinders on, and you have to ignore those bright, shiny objects, because online they're coming at you every day from all over the place.
No, 100%. That makes sense. And I'm curious too, you might have a similar answer, but were there any other epiphany moments of things you wish you had known earlier in your coaching journey or business journey of you're like, oh, I wish someone had told me or explained this to me, kind of thing?
I would say there's huge advantages, obviously, to monthly recurring revenue. And that's where this program I launched this year helps. I've had a membership newsletter before and stuff like that, but the numbers weren't as big as that. The problem, if you don't have the recurring revenue and stuff, and you're starting every month from zero, now maybe you have some clients that are on, the 6-month packages or whatever, but it makes things much easier if you have recurring revenue that's consistent, that there's a floor that, even if you get hit by a bus and you're in a hospital, and can't move, you're still going to make at least X amount. Takes a lot of pressure off. And I really wish, hindsight's 2020, right? Like if I'd known that a Jungle VIP would take it off, if I would have done it back in 2015. Well, the group was smaller in
I was
2015.
to say, because I feel like you had to build
Yeah.
a community first to even get to the point to even
Yeah.
launch this offer. Like you can't just
Yeah.
launch the offer.
But the community was
Yeah.
probably big enough in 2020, right? Or 2019, 2020 that I could have done it. But that being said, you can't second guess. It's very easy to play Monday morning quarterback. Life would be easy if you could do that, or if you had a crystal ball. So, but that's what I would suggest, is look at a way to work monthly recurring revenue into your coaching or whatever it is that you're doing.
No, I love that. Makes sense. And so, speaking of that, let's talk about community monetization and your topic of the day. So, tell us, tell us your journey of building your community, monetizing it, however you want to start. Love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I should first say, when I'm talking about community, it doesn't mean it has to be a Facebook group. I mean, Facebook works for me because my target market are on Facebook. But if your people aren't on Facebook, it doesn't make sense to have a Facebook group. You could build a community on one of the other ones, like School, Circles, one you hear. You could consider an email list community as well, right? If in a certain way. So I'm not saying it has to be a Facebook group, but that being said, how many billion people on the planet are logged onto Facebook consistently, every day? So it does make it easier. They don't have to go off the platform if they're on Facebook, of course. So I'm big on community, because if you don't have a community, and let's say you're relying on whichever social media platform, just the main news feed, putting your stuff out there, well, you know what it's like. It's very noisy. It's lower reach than it was, a couple of years ago even. And the analogy that I use, or the metaphor, would be, if you're relying on the news feed, it's like you're in a little tiny boat in the middle of the ocean, kind of yelling out. Yeah, you might get some business or whatever, but it's going to be tough to be found. A community is like having a private island that you're bringing people in over to, right? Hopefully not like Epstein's Island or anything.
yeah, not that kind of private island.
Yeah. I won't talk about P. Diddy or any of them. But,
yeah.
So you have or Lord of the Flies. That's not a good island analogy.
Yeah.
But if you have an island, then people are coming on there, and then they get to know, like, and trust you, and it's much easier to get your message, your offers in front of them, as opposed to relying on the main social media news feed for whichever one it is. And that's why I like having a community.
Well, and so tell us about the evolution of your community. Like, sounds like you've been running it for 10 years now, the Coaching Jungle?
9. Yeah.
9 years. So tell us about that evolution.
So basically how I stumbled onto it, not that a Facebook group's any secret or whatever, but what had happened was, the first year of Natural Born Coaches, since it launched in November of 2014, it was a daily show. So I learned from John Lee Dumas and Kate with their Podcasters Paradise stuff. Like, John's doing with the EO Fire daily. Okay, daily must be the way to go. So that's why the show's up to almost 900 episodes now. Is the first 360 some build up really quickly. But back in that first year, I had a Facebook group for guests of Natural Born Coaches, and it had a super unique, crazy name. It was called Natural Born Coaches Past Guest. It wasn't terribly original, but so I had a few hundred people in there that had been on the show. And
you just put the guests from the show into the Facebook group. No one else.
No one else.
Wow.
I wanted to build this community of the guests. You mentioned Bob Berg. Bob was on the show early on, and he's actually coming back for episode 900. Which is cool. But there are like really good people in there. But what was happening was, I had a lot of people I didn't know requesting to join the group, and I had to send a standard answer to them. Hey, Joe, I saw that you requested to join the Natural Born Coaches Past Guest group. However, that group's only for people who have been on my podcast, and it was kind of like, have a nice life, right? So they just saw coaches. They didn't clue in about the past guest or whatever, and that's fine. So after a year of that, and I was getting so many of those requests, I'm like, maybe I should actually have a group that's open for all coaches, aspiring coaches, people interested in coaching. We have some service providers in the Coaching Jungle, agency owners, but it's almost all coaches. So I just said, you know what, I take the approach to Confucius saying, man who chases two rabbits catches neither. I said, I'm going to shut down the Facebook group for the podcast and focus just on the Coaching Jungle. And that was in September of 2015 that the Coaching Jungle opened. And so we had a nice little start because I invited everyone from the podcasting Facebook group over. So most of them came. And then just where my name was out there with the show and other stuff, we had 500 pretty quick. And then once it hit 1,000, I found that was a tipping point that it really started to roll, because I don't know if that's anything that's, I don't think it's a magic number for Facebook or whatever that they say, oh, we have 1,000, we're going to start showing it to everyone. But I think they did show it to more people as we grew up to that. And then it just, kept going from there. We've gotten really picky on who we accept. So really the group by now could be at 40,000 or 50,000 if it was wide open, but we have certain criteria we don't want in that group to keep the quality up. So I would rather 26,000 people that are good quality as opposed to 50,000 with a lot of spammers or fake accounts.
No, it makes sense. So you got the group up to 1,000. That's interesting too, that you believe that once you hit the 1,000 mark, that Facebook started promoting your group without you having to promote it per se. And that's interesting too, that you grew this group without any paid growth as well, right?
Yeah, no paid ads. There's a few ways of growing it. Interviews like this, I go out on a lot of shows and I'll usually plug the group or whatever. So whenever an interview is released, if it was a recorded guest appearance, I notice there's an uptick for requests. My email list, the PS at the bottom of my first email is mentioning the group, so it's interesting. The Facebook group, the email list grows the Facebook group because of the PS, but then the Facebook group grows the email list because one of the membership questions asked if they would like to get my emails and, leave your best email address. So it's like an ecosystem. They're helping to grow each other.
No, it makes sense. And then, so tell us about how you knew you could monetize your community once you had it growing. Like, it's kind of like, all right, I have all these people who I kind of oversee and and tell us too about how you moderate the community, because obviously trying to stay awake 24/7 looking at this group to see who's spamming and who's not, like how the heck do you moderate and manage that?
So on the monetization end, I knew that I could promote my offers obviously in there. And that's one thing I recommend for community owners is you can't be timid about promoting your own services. Yeah. Some people are, and I can kind of notice it when I'm in groups. They'll say things like, hey guys, sorry to bug you. This will be the only time I mention this. I have a couple spots open in my group coaching, no pressure, but if you want to check, just the language, it's very timid. Yeah. And I've always taken the approach, we're strict on rules when it comes to promotion and stuff like that. But where I spend hundreds of hours a year on this community, I'm not going to feel bad promoting my stuff. And I basically put right in the welcome thing in the group description. If you're not cool with that, it's fine if you leave, So I take that approach with it, is here's a community, costs nothing. You're making connections. You're growing your business in here as well. Then, it's free. There's got to be a compensation for me for building it. So the coaching part of it, I understood obviously. And that's why I started the group. People say, why do you start the community? And it's maybe not cool for people to say. They're a little weird. Coaches like to pretend they don't like money. So they're like, oh, no, I don't want money. I want to impact the world and I want to, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that's great. But let's not pretend that you don't want money. You should or shouldn't be in business. I stumbled on the JV part of it, though, would have been in around 2019. So, it's, about 5 years ago. And what had happened, that we could do a whole other show on this. So I won't get into the whole thing. But basically, I used to do my joint ventures like everyone else, as a affiliate commissions. So if Andrew has a program that's $5,000, I promote it to my audience. Every sale, I get 25% or whatever, And I changed in 2019, and I since then have done just flat fee JVs. Partner pays a flat fee. They keep 100% of sales. But a big part of what I do, there's lots of stuff that I include with it, but the Facebook group promotion is a really big part of that. And they're allowed to promote 5 times a day on the wall during our campaign if they want to. So that is the other monetization part, was the joint ventures, where the coaching jungle is a big part of it. And then the spinoff, which we mentioned earlier, was the VIP program in the jungle, which just came out about 4 months ago with it. So you always want to keep your eyes open, because there's going to be things you had no clue that this was going to happen. If you had told me in 2015 when I launched a coaching jungle about this, JV or VIP thing stuff, I'd be like, what the heck, or whatever. Yeah. I kind of stumbled into them, right, as time goes on. So you want to keep your radar up.
Well, I think that's a good reminder too to people that, like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Like,
Yeah.
if you're listening to this interview, you're like, oh, I think it's too late to start a group now. It's too late to start a community. It's just like, are you going to be saying this 5-10 years from now? Probably not. So,
Well, I
it's
thought
hard
when
to
I
wait.
launched my podcast in November of 2014, I was too late. I was late to the party, and I remember thinking, "Oh man, I wish I would have launched when John Lee Dumas launched his in 2012." But I'm 2 years too late. So,
Yeah.
but I said, "Okay, I'll go ahead with it." Now I've people, oh yeah, well it's easy for you, Mark. Your show launched in 2014, but it's too late now. I'm like, yeah, but there's also a lot more people out there that know what a podcast is. You got podcasting cars
Yeah.
on in your phone, in your pocket and everything else. So that's the advantage. There's a bigger market of listeners. There is a lot more competition for those eardrums as well, but it's never going to be a perfect time. If you wait for the perfect time, you'll miss every opportunity. So I'm just a big fan of jumping in and doing something.
No, yeah, our founder of Podfest, Chris Comitso, says, start ugly. Like, it's good
Yeah.
just to get started and get going, and you'll learn along the way. I mean, just like we were so intimidated to drive a car for the first time, and you're like, where do you put where's the gas pedal? Where's the brakes? And I don't know if in Canada, they don't drive on the left side of the road in Canada, do they? You guys are also, oh, okay.
Yeah. Although we're part of the British Commonwealth, but thankfully we don't drive in the opposite side of the road and
Okay.
some other stuff. Although it is annoying, some of the Canadians, we use the British spelling for things like humor. It's HUMOUR, color,
Yeah.
OUR. So me, where my audience or most of my clients are in the States and stuff, I'm like, should I spell color the British way or American?
Yeah, tomatoes, tomatoes. That's how it goes sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
And then when you're doing your offers to your group, I'm curious because I'm reading Alex Hormozi's 100 million leads right now, and he's kind of like saying what Gary Vaynerchuk does, but like the jab, jab, right hook. Like, do you have the formula in your mind? Like, as long as I make enough value posts first, then I can make an offer, or do you just think just by having the group be valuable in itself, I'm comfortable making all offers I want? Curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making an offer every day, but it's not like every one of my posts is an offer. So the foundational piece of it is my daily email, which then goes around social media, including in the coaching jungle. But if I might be posting 4 times a day, the other 3 are, like you say, quote value posts. Or maybe I'm making a couple offer posts a day and mix it up. So
Yeah.
you're right. It can't be 100% all the time, sell, sell, sell. But also the way that I do it is I take this approach with email, social media posts with offers in them. Is I want to give an aha first, or like a lesson, something I want them to know, something that's valuable. And then it transitions to a real, it's not an arm twisty fake urgency type offer like the Home Shopping Network with a bunch of caps and exclamation points or whatever. I'll say what I have to say, and then it'll transition. Oh, by the way, I go over this in greater detail in module 3 of my XYZ program. Check out the link in the comments or something like that.
No, it makes sense. Okay. And then I'm curious too. So it sounds like you have, obviously you're an entrepreneur, so you have multiple income sources. But it sounds like as far as your coaching business goes, you have the 3 income sources of clients, of your JV programs, and the Jungle VIP. Is that the main thing at the moment? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say I think of it as 2 legs of the stool or table, I guess you could say, where it's clients or partners, and then the partners would be split into the VIP or the Jungle VIP. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you're right, though. It's 3, but I kind of group the VIP and JVs together. Yeah.
And then I'm curious too. I mean, how do you select people that you allowed to coach you or mentor you, or have you had the same coach for the last 10 years and you're not going to dissuade from that? I'm curious how you view that.
No, I've had different coaches for different things. At any given time, I often have a coach at least, or mentors that wouldn't consider themselves coaches. But how do I choose them? A lot of it, especially now, 10 years into it, is the gut test, and I just say my spidey senses are finely tuned. So there's so much BS out there in the online space, and people, they're making big promises. And I know you get people reaching out to you all the time. And I am very I hate to say that I'm skeptical or whatever. The rule of thumb I tell people is assume everyone online's full of it until they prove you wrong, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is awful to say or whatever. You could look at things like talking to people, your friends who've worked with them, if you're getting referrals and stuff like that. I'm really lucky because now what I find is I have people like, I'll ask, hey, Andrew, I'm looking for help on this. Like, who do you know that can help me with it? If you tell me about someone, I know they're good quality, right?
Yeah.
So that definitely helps.
No, that makes sense. And then, yeah, for those who are like getting new to the coaching space or have like rose-colored glasses, or per se, have there been any like surefire ways to tell if a coach is? Well, I know you mentioned earlier, like, oh, if they say you're going to make $1 million in 6 months while working 5 minutes a day, they're probably probably trying to trick you or lie to you, kind of thing. But what other ways can people know how to vet coaches? Anything else besides spidey senses, per se, to know if they should work with someone or not?
Well, a lot of it's common sense. If you have someone that reaches out to you, and let's say community building, we're talking about, and they're like, yeah, I'll help you build a huge Facebook group and help you monetize it. Then you look and they have a Facebook group with 13 people in it, and half them are their family members.
Yeah.
Or same thing with email list growth. Their email list is 200 subscribers or so on. Then there's a disconnect there, right? And I think there's a little bit of common sense that way that would have to go into it. As I mentioned, I'm big on daily emails, and I've had programs before teaching people daily emails, but I didn't start doing it a month after I started daily emails. Like, I was well into thousands of emails before I started doing it.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny. Remember last summer when Threads was the big thing and everyone was
Yeah.
gushing about how great? I never started, no desire, never. Grown adults, the coaching were, oh my God, so much fun. You could go over there and dunk on Elon Musk or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like, okay, that doesn't seem like a great use of time. But anyways, I laugh because within a few days of Threads starting and becoming big, there were people teaching these earn six figures with Threads and all these like Threads gurus. And I'm like, it's been up and running for a week and now you're selling this. That's a perfect indication of how crazy things are online in 2024. And same thing I'm sure happened with Clubhouse when it was the hot thing back a few years ago and so on. So yeah, just be careful. There's a lot of people who are looking to just jump in and make a quick buck. But what I do find is they tend to weed themselves out, because I know people who are doing really well in 2017, 2018, and stuff like that. They're no longer around because they were great at getting that first sale, but they weren't people weren't getting results, so they weren't getting repeat business, they weren't getting referrals, they didn't have any staying power. And then they moved on to NFTs, Bitcoin, I don't know what they're doing now, AI, whatever. But yeah, I could talk all day about that stuff.
No, it makes sense because yeah, it's it's too bad we live in a world right now where people can actually help you and they can actually serve you, but because we're just so used to being scammed and tricked so many times, like it's too bad that how hard it is to gain someone's trust nowadays. But it's just kind of how it
Yeah,
goes too, kind of thing.
the market shifted, which is probably a good thing overall, because it means that people who are good at what they do will separate themselves
Yeah,
from the rest. But I found that prospects nowadays, potential clients, it's almost like if you're dating someone who's had in her or his past a string of bad relationships, and then they bring that baggage into your relationship with them, and you're trying to kind of fight against that. It's like, okay, I know that your ex cheated on you 100 times, and you had to, go through his phone every hour or whatever. Like, that's not me. You don't have to worry about it. It's the same thing now as I'm hearing people being like, I'd love to work with you, Mark. I just went through this last year where I hired someone and paid them $10,000 for this and didn't do anything, and so on. Now, I'm not saying that there's two sides to every story. There's
of
a
course.
subreddit that I sometimes look at and for entertainment. Reddit's a cesspool, but it's good for content ideas.
Yeah.
But there is a coaching subreddit, and it's extremely negative in there. Like, the people are just, and I'm sure there's some that are legit and they're speaking the truth and the right thing. But I also get the sense that there's some that either maybe they failed at whatever, or they just don't like the person the coach for whatever reason. And now they're running them down anonymously on Reddit. So there's two sides to every story.
Have you been run down yet? Has anyone complained about your programs and your coaching at all?
Coaching, no. I got my butt kicked in real estate with the closure. Just attacked
Interesting.
the local media. I thank God the social media really wasn't a big thing back then, because this was 15 years ago. But the local media tore a strip off me, and then I had a lot of it, like weird stuff with people I didn't even know, and things like that. And I'm not trying to say some of it wasn't deserved, because it was a messy business closure. Online, I haven't dealt with much of that, and I've been really careful. Now, you're never going to please everyone. There's obviously, some people out there that for whatever reason don't like you. But I definitely learned some lessons from my past life in real estate, to be really careful, and also not let the wrong people into my world. I had a guy years ago, this is probably 5 years ago, joined my group coaching program. He went on our first call, and it was a great call. I not trying to sound cocky, but I delivered what I said I would. Everyone was happy, and so on. The day after, he reached out to me, and he's like, Mark, basically that wasn't what I was expecting. And, I want to refund all this other stuff. And I was just like, I'm not going to let this cancer into the group. This guy, I knew from when he was joining that he had spent about 10 years trying to get things up and running with his business. And he was running down different people in our world or whatever, which should have been a sign for me. And I said, look, I'm just going to, no worries. I'm going to send you a refund. I said, but I worked it out to prorate it. So I kept one call's worth in there. It was like an asshole tax, basically. And I sent him like 11 of the 12, what
Payments,
would be paid, whatever,
yeah.
the 12 weeks. It rubbed me the wrong way, because it'd be one thing if I didn't show up, or if I showed up, it was
Yeah.
just garbage. I'm like, no, like, you got to have a legit thing. Also, I'm thinking this is probably the reason that you haven't succeeded, buddy. Like, if you're like this, there's obviously something going on in there, and just a jerk, but that's fine. There's, so many people out there. It's impossible to be liked by everyone. You could be Mother Teresa, and you're going to get people like that just, especially if you want to be successful. And I think this is where a lot of coaches hold back, is they say they want to be successful. They've got the big goals, the influencing millions of people, but subconsciously they're worried that they're going to get flack from strangers on Reddit or comments on Facebook ads or whatever. And if you're not comfortable with that type of competition, like, look at what some people say about Tony Robbins, and
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
like that. Like, if he was worried about it, he wouldn't have gotten to where he was now. So if you want to be big and you want to impact that many lives, you're going to have a thick skin, because you're going to have people hating you regardless.
It makes sense. I know it's one of the toughest things as a coach is like you have good advice and you're delivering value, but then if people like don't do the work or don't listen to you, and then they still blame it on you, it's just
I don't give guarantees. I know some
yeah,
people say they give guarantees, but it's really not a guarantee, because the people have to jump through so many hoops to get the
yeah,
money and run a marathon, and
yeah. It's a
their
lot.
Iron Man and everything else. You'll never get a refund, but they say that.
Yeah,
But it's why I don't do guarantees or anything, because if somebody enrolls in one of my programs and then they lay on the couch 24/7 watching Netflix and don't lift a finger, then obviously it's not going to work. And you have to take some responsibility for you as well, like the consumer, the client that's going in there. I've purchased programs before, and sometimes they're not the right fit, but I've never gone back to a person or run them down publicly or whatever. I'm like, okay, and usually I get something from the program anyways. Or
yeah,
the flip side of it is I learn how I don't want to run my business. So I won't say I joined a few years back, joined a program, and it wasn't really as advertised, and or whatever, but there was too much stuff thrown into it, everything but the kitchen sink. It's like you'd have to spend 24/7 going through all this stuff, and there wasn't any support really from the person selling it. So it wasn't too impressed. But on the flip side is it's reminded me, as I'm creating programs and stuff, is I don't want people to feel that way about mine. And it's
yeah.
forced me to, I'm in the process of creating something now. It's forced me to trim what I'm including, because some people feel like, oh, I got to include hundreds of hours of videos, so people think it's really worth it. Then they confuse everyone. And I'm like, no, I don't want people to feel like that. So actually it was worth the money, because it showed me how I don't want to do my stuff.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And going back to your business or your house closure story too, I am curious, like what other failures would you say you've had in your coach business building journey, or since you switched over from real estate, have you had any failures? It seems like you've been Midas touch, like everything you touch has been turning to gold.
I don't know. I wouldn't say like stumbles or failures. I'm a very impatient guy, and it probably that comes from real estate because it was hockey stick growth when I was in my 20s with real estate every year, just shooting up, and the commissions every year, everything was just like sky high. Coaching has been more of a gradual climb. Like it hasn't been the hockey stick growth where you're, like five xing every year and stuff like that. So I don't know if that'd be considered a failure. I'm very impatient. I have a bad habit even when I achieve a goal that I don't like celebrate it like I should. I'm like, okay, what's next? And
Yeah.
it's like the goal just goes further down the field, and that's something I have to work on because it is an issue. I should be celebrating it more, but for me, I'm like, no, I should be further along. And especially online, there's a comparison trap because you're seeing so many people that are sharing their wins. Now they might be full of it, but I'm thinking, gee, he started, the same time as me, and he's saying he's making 10 million a year. Like, geez, what's going on?
No, it makes sense. And I'm curious too, like, even though you've been having, gradual growth and used to hockey stick growth, has imposter syndrome ever been a part of your business journey at all? Like, oh, geez, do I even know what I'm doing? Do I even deserve to be here? I'm curious if that's ever been a thing for you.
Starting my coaching business, it was something I had to get over because I had gone through the business closure experience. So the little voice in my head was like, who are you to be, coaching people on business? But what I had to remind myself is, well, wait a minute. I had 10 years of nonstop success in real estate, which, starting with nothing, and I looked about 15 years old. I didn't have the gray, no
Yeah.
beard and no gray hair. I was 21. I looked 15, and then it just built that up. So I had to remind myself, wait, I've had a lot more wins than losses, even though it didn't end well with it. But yeah, I had that feeling in 2014 because it's still in the back of your mind for sure.
And so, how do you help combat your imposter syndrome to help you pick
Keep
yourself
busy.
up again? Yeah.
There's a little bit of fake it till you make it. I don't mean like we are talking about with the online space where you just make up numbers and like all this stuff, but you have to play. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm not a fan of what Disney's done to Star Wars. So
Yeah.
the newer Star Wars is garbage. But
Yeah.
I'm an old school original trilogy Star Wars fan, and you have to play a Jedi mind trick on yourself and almost convince yourself that you deserve to be there. One of the best books I know of to get around imposter syndrome and everything is The Alter Ego Effect. Todd Herman. Have you read that one?
No, but I think I know the concept a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The Alter Ego Effect. I mean, I recommend people read the book, but in a nutshell, you create an alter ego. When you enter your field of play, you are now that person. So Beyonce did it when she was getting going because she was started singing in churches and things. So then all of a sudden she wanted to adopt more of a out there persona on stage. It was Sasha Fierce, I think it was.
Sasha Fierce.
Todd,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Todd tells stories in the book about he's worked with athletes, professional basketball players, hockey players, and so on. That when they go on the court, they have often a totem, which is an item to remind them of. So if their alter ego is Wonder Woman, for example, they're a WNBA player, maybe they have a bracelet with the Wonder Woman logo or something. One of his hockey players he was working with as a client was timid going into the corners to go after the puck because when he was younger, he got body checked and injured in a corner. And so he adapted the alter ego of the Tasmanian Devil, where he's just going to be crazy, just swinging his arms and just like a Tasmanian devil in those corners to go after the puck. No one's going to get it. And that definitely helps with imposter syndrome as well. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like a cartoon character, superhero, or whatever. You can pick different things and combine them or whatever. But yeah, it does help to have an alter ego.
Well, it makes sense. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, a couple questions left. One of them is, what do you believe are non-negotiable actions as an entrepreneur to be successful?
Non-negotiable, boys. I'm trying to think the best one that I would say for actions, because we talked about this before we came on live. I don't want to say early riser because there's some people that do really well waking up a little bit later in the day than they work later or whatever. Non-negotiable action, though, I would say it's consistency. Once you've identified what works, it's doing it and just showing up. Like right now, daily emails, it's like brushing my teeth. I couldn't not email. If I tried to not email, it wouldn't happen because it's just ingrained in there. Now I batch write my emails. I don't sit down at the laptop every morning and a blank screen and try to come up with something. I'll usually write a week or two of email and schedule them in. But it's that consistency, whether whatever it is that you're doing, could be YouTube, podcasting, the sticking with it. And I feel like there's not a lot of stick to itness with people in the online space because they get distracted or they expect instant results. It's like they plant something in the ground and then they water it one day and then they check, like, I don't know, 4 hours later and nothing's sprouted out yet. And then they're like, oh, well, that doesn't work, so I'm going to go try something else.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. You know, you got to plant it, you got to water it, be patient, let the sun do its work as well, and then things will come out of the ground.
Well, makes sense. Well, all right. The last two questions are: how can we best contact you? Anything you want to offer the audience? What's the best way to get a hold of you, and any things we should know about?
Yeah, so the central hub is naturalborncoaches.com. You can check out the podcasts. My daily emails go on there as well, so there is a blog with those. So naturalborncoaches.com. The Coaching Jungle group, we always want good people in there, so that's at thecoachingjungle.com. And also, we have the VIP perk or program that I mentioned to you for Coaching Jungle members. It's super cheap, way to reach 26,000 plus potential clients, $97 a month right now, or $9.97 a year. So full disclosure, you have an affiliate link so people can support you. And I recommend they use that link wherever you're going to put it up. I'll get you the link and you can put it there. But that VIP, especially for people if they're frustrated, let's say by Facebook ads or something, they're just not getting the results, or for $97, you've got a very big audience to reach there.
No, makes sense. All right. Well, thank you, Marc. And the final question is, what's one takeaway you want someone to have with this interview today?
Oh, one takeaway. Well, why don't we go with read The Alter Ego Effect? I'll get a plug. Todd's been on my show. He's great. He's a fellow Canadian living in, I think, your neck of the woods now. But read The Alter Ego Effect, and that should help.
All right. Well, thank you, Marc. Well, yeah, make sure to connect with Marc online. Marc, thank you again for joining us today. And for those listening in, make sure to say hi to Marc, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.